This is Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, produced by Studio 5 at Mud Advertising, Totally Iowa Media, and News Talk 1540 KXCL, where you hear from the candidates in contested races in the June 2026 Iowa primary election. Now, Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. From Studio 5 at Mud and Cedar Falls, here is Jeff Stein.
Hello and welcome. There will be a new United States Senator representing the state of Iowa in Washington in January of 2027. It's an open seat due to the retirement of Senator Joni Ernst after 2 terms. There are 2 Republicans seeking their party's nomination to be on the November general election ballot, and one of them joins me here today. Jim Carlin is a Republican. He is running for U.S. Senate. You find his campaign online at carlinforussenate.com. He is an attorney, a former state senator, and this is his second run for the U.S. Senate. Mr. Carlin, thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Why run for the United States Senate? Again, you have been a state senator. You've held elective office. Why U.S. Senate?
Well, I think it obviously affords you a lot more opportunity to have significant influence. And, I think just looking down the road 20, 30 years, you have to be a little bit more visionary in approach. What are the realities government is creating for our children and our grandchildren? And I think we need to be far more intentional about planning out their future.
You were the first candidate from either party to enter this race at a time when it was thought there would be an incumbent. You were not afraid, in other words, to challenge an incumbent. That would have been uphill, but why this seat at this time then specifically?
Well, I think, as I said, it is a unique opportunity. One vote in the Senate carries a lot of weight. And if there's a small gap, you don't need a majority anymore. If even a small minority of senators can really move the ball in powerful ways in government if you get there. And I've done that in the Iowa House and Senate, and I learned the value of putting together alliances. Even small ones can make a huge difference. And I think you'd be able to do that same strategy, and it would work just as well in the U.S. Senate as it would at the Iowa State House in some respects.
We are at a time, I think it's fair to say, of hyper-partisanship, and we see that at the U.S. Senate level where the margin is small, there's the filibuster issue, et cetera. Give some examples, if you would, of some of these situations when you were in Des Moines and forged some of these coalitions across the aisle, getting people to come to your way of thinking, and how that might be able to work in Washington, which has a different dynamic.
It does have a different dynamic, but it all comes down to votes. And, I am a pro-life legislator, and when I served in the Iowa Senate, we were told, despite having the House, Senate, and governor's office, that no meaningful pro-life legislation was going to go through. And, it was a dilemma that we, couldn't really reconcile with, why we were there and what we wanted to get done. And Rick Bertrand from Sioux City, I went to Rick and I said, Rick, how do we solve this? And he came back the next day and he said, Carlin, if you and me can get 2 other senators, and I believe Brad Zahn and Jake Chapman, of course, the 4 of us leveraged our votes and said, well, you won't get a budget unless we get a heartbeat bill. And 2 nights later, 2:20 in the morning, we're debating the heartbeat bill that actually made its way up to the Supreme Court of the United States.
Now, that's obviously an issue that has some bipartisan approach.
Absolutely.
But again, what you were talking about there is, hey, we've got the votes. Why can't we get something done? That's very important. And they're having a hard enough time, my view, not yours, of doing that in Washington now. But are there some examples where you were able to walk across the aisle and say, let's do this because it's right for Iowa? And again, I'm looking at transferable skill set to Washington.
Well, in the 7th Amendment right to a jury trial, I did some work with some Democrats, Tony Bisignano, for instance. That was something I did. I am a trial lawyer, and I know plenty of Democrats, and we think that the Constitution means just what it says when it says that you have a constitutional right to a civil jury trial. And when you mixed in the tort reform that we were looking at the time, just seemed really grossly unjust, in my view. $250,000 for a medical malpractice case. that was something where I was able to put together some manner of coalition with Democrats, and we were able to stop it, actually. Not entirely, but we had enough leverage to assert some influence in a meaningful way that changed the definition of the legislation.
Give us a sense of what you believe the role of government is. You've talked about being a right-to-life representative, but broadly speaking, the role of government that might help us get a sense, we'll talk some specific issues later, but just in terms of what's guiding you in terms of as a public servant?
I think the government has two roles. I think it is supposed to serve, and I think it is supposed to protect and defend the rights, the Bill of Rights under the Constitution and the Constitution itself. I think its primary role is protecting the people, and we've departed from that in quite a significant way when you look at the role of government in making the financial realities of all of us much, much more difficult. I don't know how old you are, Jeff, but when I was a kid in the 70s, the government took about 35 cents out of every dollar my dad worked for. And some estimates right now have that at 52 cents. That isn't something, that's not a trajectory we can stay on or reconcile or make peace with, as it relates to our children's future and our grandchildren's future. We have to stop that trend, and we have to get to the root cause of why it is that way. And I think the primary reason is we elect candidates when in reality, we're electing donors who know how to use the government to make as much money as they can off of middle-class people, working families, and seniors. And the people of Iowa need somebody who's going to stand up for them and not be defined by super PAC donations, but rather by their best interests.
We're at a time now as a nation with $39 trillion of debt. Yeah. It was, I think, 5 months between getting from 38 to 39 trillion, and it accelerates to where by the end of the summer, by Labor Day, I think we'll be at 40. So how do you turn that around when, A, you've got the donor game, as you mentioned,
you do,
but B, you've got members of the House and Senate who talk about fiscal responsibility, but at the same time, they talk about how much they're bringing home to the district. You can't have that both ways.
You can't have it both ways. And, you should look at what the donations are and what the votes are. That's a pretty good way to define why people do what they do. Ashley Hinson got $55,800 from Bruce Rastetter of Summit Carbon Solutions. That's an example of that. The money drives a lot of the votes, and I think three things. I think as crazy as this sounds, Jeff, why aren't we looking at a balanced budget? Because it's the responsible thing to do. And responsibility is when you take ownership of a situation and you deal with the harsh realities of it. And we do have some harsh realities to deal with. I think we need to audit the Federal Reserve. The monetary policies of the Federal Reserve had an enormous impact on the housing sector. I think we also need to look at bringing more semblance of free market into our economy and have the government actually fight for free market instead of facilitate monopoly control of markets that's hurting all of us.
How can one U.S. Senator from Iowa make a change? And I understand it starts with one vote, then you get two, so I do understand that. But you have to have a game plan, and you know who the players are currently in Washington. A lot of them will still be there if you're elected in June to the nomination, then November. So how can you make the difference?
It was something I did in the State House. I mean, I had one strong ally when I first went into the State House. It was Sandy Salmon. And when you take hard stands, people do notice. And, on the other side of that, you can build some small coalitions. And I actually started an organization called the Iowa Liberty Network. And the premise of it is simple. Let's elect people that are going to stand by the rights and interests of the people of Iowa. There's 21 of them now at the State House, and I think they're probably going to add another 6 or 7. I had to resign from the board because of this race, but people need to have the self-awareness that huge campaign war chests mean only one thing: huge strings that don't serve the interests of the people.
Jim Carlin is a Republican. He's running for U.S. Senate. And when we come back after this break, we'll talk about more of his background and what led him to public service in a variety of ways. Carlin4USSenate.com is the website. Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, continues in a moment.
All the great news talk programs you love from KXCL on your radio can be with you wherever you go.
I'm Todd Starnes.
This is Mark Levin.
I'm Tim Harwood.
Bill O'Reilly here.
I'm Kim Commando.
Hey, it's Glenn Beck.
I'm Jeff Stein.
Just download the free KXCL mobile app. You can find us in the App Store or Google Play. Make sure you never miss a second of the conversation. Download the KXCL app today. It's a great way to stay connected to where Iowa comes to talk.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mudd Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business, 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
You're watching Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. Here again is Jeff Stein.
And Iowa Talking Points continues. We're speaking with Jim Carlin. Mr. Carlin from the Sioux City area is a Republican. He's running for U.S. Senate, Carlin4USSenate.com. And I credited you with being from Siouxland, but that's not where you were born and raised.
No, Iowan by choice, Jeff. I grew up in New Jersey and Western Massachusetts and came out here, well, I guess 37, 38 years ago, met the people of Iowa. And I just, it didn't take me long to figure out the quality of life was way better out here. And when I graduated from law school, this is where I decided to make my home, and it was absolutely the right choice for me.
Talk a bit about your family and their efforts as you're making this run for U.S. Senate.
Well, your family is indispensable. And my wife, Donna, is just a wonderful one. I have a great wife. I truly do. And she helps every way she can. She makes some of the road trips with me, and she does behind the scenes stuff, and she's very engaged in the process. And that, with the backing of your wife, you can get it done. Without it, I don't know how you would. So, yeah.
What led you to first enter public service, Iowa House, Iowa Senate? Because, again, as a lawyer, you have a busy practice.
I do.
You cannot just put your job on hold to go to Des Moines 5 months a year, much less make these runs. But what led you to first make a run for public office?
Well, the thing, life is short, and you want to make an impact with the time that you have. And as a lawyer, you watch the realities of people's lives, with, seniors being affected by this or that. And, some of the areas of practice that I was involved in medical malpractice and civil litigation, you really get a bird's eye view of people's lives and how they're affected. But the main reason I got in was I have 3 grandchildren. And, we have to start to embrace the responsibility of the world we're creating for them and be far more intentional in our planning and our foresight for what their future looks like. And honestly, I think the government by and large has really neglected that responsibility. And to me, that's the weightiest of all responsibilities.
I asked you in the previous segment to talk about the role of government. You're a Republican, but we find that means different things to different people these days.
Right.
There's a fragmentation, and it's no different in any party over time. But what does it mean to you to be a Republican in elective office?
Well, republic. We get the word Republican from republic. That means we're going to have a law that's defined by a constitution and a Bill of Rights, and we're going to limit government and advance freedom. We're going to advance individual dignity in every way we can. And boundaries of individual dignity, and that the American dream itself, that opportunity to live out your dream and define it your way and tell your story the way you want to tell it, as long as you don't harm somebody else. And you want your grandkids to have that opportunity. You want all children to have that opportunity, and I think we're losing it, like economically, with where the housing costs are today and the health care and the student loans getting is really tantamount to indentured servitude. It's becoming harder and harder to realize the American dream that you and I have had. And we have a responsibility to make sure that they get their shot at it.
But to a large degree, and I think of the student loan situation, but you could say the same thing about home mortgages and a variety of other issues. The government has made the situation worse in an effort to be accommodating. In other words, I think of student loans saying, well, we want everyone to have the opportunity to go to college, so we'll guarantee the loans. But when the institutions of higher learning know the bill's going to be paid, they have no incentive to have competitive prices, and there you go.
That's exactly right. They have no incentive to charge lower tuition because they know no matter what they charge, it's going to be paid for. And, what does not, I think the interest rates right now are close to twice what they were before Obama helped us. And I think the average tuition cost is now roughly twice what it was when he came up with this idea. But, as the lawyer and maybe, kind of a little bit of cynic in me, I think outcomes usually are intentions. And when you look at a $1.7 trillion industry that's being managed by the private sector, and they're making a lot of money on it, Jeff, they're making a lot of money on the sweat and toil of our kids. And why is it you can pay off a car so much quicker than a student loan? Just how it's defined and the number of years. Average kid right now is at Wartburg the other night, 15 to 25 years to pay off a 4-year degree. That's a long time to be paying $500, $600, $700 a month, and it's unconscionable.
It's also hard when you're paying that kind of tuition to get a job right out of college that is going to let you pay your bills. And again, this is just all part of that broader cycle. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about your time in Des Moines. We talked about some things where you had worked with others. Mm-hmm. What are some pieces of legislation that people could point to and say, if it weren't for Jim Carlin, this wouldn't have happened? Okay.
No, the state's active shooter protocol with the infrastructure, that was a bill that I wrote. And, the irony of that one was the day that bill went to full committee and I was told you don't have the votes, the Parkland, Florida shooting occurred. And it forced passage of that. And then Iowa now has an active shooter protocol and infrastructure in all the public and private schools in the state. They made me the Senate Veterans Affairs chair. And when I took that job on, I was asked to visit the Iowa Veterans Home. I exposed elder abuse there with my friend Jeff Edler, and the commandant there got fired 3 months later for stealing $100,000. And that was 2 investigations. It took 2. The first one, the Iowa Veterans Trust Fund, Jeff, was getting less than 1% interest on $30 million. It now gets 10 times that. So you have to be willing to confront things that are wrong and come up with a change that's workable. And I wrote the bathroom and gender identity bills before they became law. I did a lot of work for seniors. It's senior visitations during COVID and things like that. And some of your stuff gets passed and some of it doesn't, but you have to get the ideas to the floor. You have to get the conversation started and good things can happen.
It sounds like in a number of these, the ideas came out of things you may have come across in your law practice or issues that people presented you with. And that's a great example of, I guess, a listening skill, but also thinking, okay, we have a challenge. How do we turn it into an opportunity?
And that was presented. Mm-hmm. And when the opportunity was presented, you got to push for it. And sometimes you make people mad when you push for it, but you have to do right by the people of Iowa.
You have given a few examples where perhaps the Republican leadership in whatever chamber was not thrilled to see you walk through the door. I can only imagine it's 10 times worse in Washington.
Sure.
But again, they control a lot of, or they carry a lot of clout. They carry a big purse to help you with reelection, et cetera. How do you put up the wall or the shield, if you will, to guard against the Washington influence overtaking you?
I think you have to know who you are and why you're there. You have to know what defines you and what you want to get done. And my faith is what defines my life. I did missions work in Kenya. I did many years of nursing home visitation. I did some football coaching. But I knew why I wanted to do those things, and I know why I want to do this. And, you know, if you want to have a meaningful life where you make a difference, this is a great opportunity. And if you can keep that frame, and you should keep that frame, you keep it by association. Like, who do you bring with you? I think you have to be very intentional about who you associate with and who you bring with you, and you try to find like-minded legislators in the Senate, in the House, in D.C., to honestly be mentored to some degree and understand the realities of the game. And until you're on the field, you don't really know the game, and then you get there, and then you got to figure it out.
Carlin for USSenate.com is the website. We'll take a short break now and return. Jim Carlin is our guest. He is a Republican running for U.S. Senate. This is Iowa Talking Points. The candidates will continue in a moment.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mudd Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year, plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business: 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
Watch all the programs in the Iowa Talking Points series online at iowatalkingpoints.com. Iowa Talking Points, the candidates, continues with Jeff Stein.
Welcome back to Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. I'm here with Jim Carlin. Mr. Carlin is a Republican from Sioux City. He's running for U.S. Senate. Carlin for USSenate.com is the website. And we're having this conversation because this is a contested primary race.
It is.
And so there are two Republicans on the ballot.
Right.
So when you ask an Iowa Republican to vote for you, they're obviously going to compare the two candidates.
Absolutely.
Distinguish yourself from your opponent in the primary?
Well, there is a contrast. You know, I think most Iowa Republicans in 2024, they believed in President Trump and what he wanted to bring to D.C. But Ashley Hinson was different. And she actually rallied at a Nikki Haley caucus event the day before caucus and rallied for people to caucus for Nikki Haley. I don't know that many people know that. I mean, she might want people to think, whether she does or doesn't, that she's always been a supporter of President Trump. That's not accurate. You know, in a time when literally millions of people are coming across our borders, and it's affected this nation's economics and this nation's realities profoundly. She sent $100 billion with her votes to Ukraine. That's not an America First approach to the job. And as I said earlier, her votes on eminent domain, and what we're talking about, the private property rights of Iowans. She's received a lot of campaign money, $55,000 plus, from Bruce Rastetter, who's really been at the forefront of undermining those private property rights. And so, you know, if you look at where the money comes from, look at the origin of the money. She has a lot of money at her war chest. But if people actually take the time to look at where the money's coming from, most of it is coming from outside Iowa. And the question you need to ask yourself is, if the money is coming from outside Iowa, is Iowa going to be represented? And I think that's a fair question. All of the money I'm getting pretty much is coming from Iowa. Probably 98% come from the people of Iowa.
When you're starting to look at running for federal office, again, the numbers are staggering of how much money you have to raise every day.
It is.
Once you get elected, the same sort of thing. You have to be able, if you're going to
You do.
To say that somebody's giving money, that they're getting something for it. Are you able to see anything in your opponent's pattern in Washington that is suggesting that some of these contributions are leading to direct action? I understand the State House and eminent domain. That's a whole different issue.
You know, like one of the questions I think Iowans should ask is, what did she get done in 6 years? She's been there 6 years.
In Washington.
In Washington. Can you think of anything off the top of your head? Maybe not. I do know that she drafted a piece of legislation called the EATS Act, which basically would have given the federal government almost all regulatory authority over state and federal or state and local regulation of agriculture. I don't think that's a good idea. And I think that kind of, I guess in economies of scale where agriculture right now has become so monopolized that our farmers are, in some respects, Jeff, contract labor because of the centralization of those markets where they're not getting a fair value for their grain or their meat. And why is that? It's because they don't have a voice. And I think when you take that kind of regulation into that, where the small providers they don't have the resources to deal with that. Like, try opening up a meat locker in Iowa. Good luck with that, because you have to have a USDA meat inspector on site. That shouldn't be. There's no reason why we can't adhere to like state regulation of agriculture. Why doesn't that work? Of course it works. So that's an example. And I think that what she did there serves the interests of big ag and not the interests of Iowa farmers.
Are there pieces of legislation that your opponent voted on as a member of the House where, if it then moved to the Senate, you would have cast a different vote or taken a different stance?
Well, as I said, my faith does define me. I would not have voted against marriage. I would not have voted to redefine marriage. And I think most Christian conservatives that are Republicans around the state wouldn't get on board with that. Joni Ernst was censured by 17 counties for that. I don't. That is not something I would have done.
The Senate is currently debating, and as we are talking, there are all sorts of things without a lot of action. But one of the things that has been debated for the past 15 months is, do you keep the filibuster? Do you dump the filibuster? Do you amend the filibuster? What is your sense, if you were a member of the chamber right now and had the ear of leadership, what advice would you give of breaking the logjam that we seem to have in that chamber?
I think we're there now. I think it was supposed to be a gentleman's agreement where we were going to have a reasoned approach for coming up with compromises. But as you said at the outset, the day of compromise really isn't what it used to be 15, 25 years ago. I mean, that way of doing business doesn't seem to be a good fit right now. And when you talk about extending the Obamacare subsidy, which has been the big holdup, right? Well, what does that really mean? You're rewarding bad behavior of massive health insurance carriers, and you're incentivizing more bad behavior. And who gets to pay the bill? We do with our premiums, and we do with our taxes. There's no good reason for that not to end quickly. And I think it's time to look at getting rid of the filibuster. It's a gentleman's agreement. Unfortunately for us, the Republicans seem to be the only ones inclined to honor gentlemen's agreements. I don't see a lot of that from the left side of the aisle.
You mentioned your opponent and the 2024 caucuses. I trust you have been a supporter of Mr. Trump.
I have.
And I'm afraid a lot of political discourse is devolving into, I'm a big Trump supporter. Well, no, I'm a bigger Trump supporter, et cetera, just because they're going back and forth. But what is there about the thesis, the general principles coming from this administration that you easily could sign on to?
America first. And
which means what? Because again, that's a discussion.
No, that is a discussion. Well, I think it means we want to be treated fairly on trade. I think it means we want to finish the wall. I think it means some hard conversations later on about Sharia law. I think it also means the SAVE Act, actually, in a way, because we're talking about protecting our sovereignty. And if we don't have the SAVE Act, how do we do that? So we're talking about our boundaries and our sovereignty as a nation being threatened, and that's something I can unequivocally get behind.
The president has been very vocal when some of his supporters are not doing exactly what he would like. I understand the rationale behind it.
Sure.
But when Jim Carlin, as a U.S. Senator, gets a call and they say, please hold for the president, that's powerful.
Oh, it is. Absolutely.
And again, this is a hypothetical. Every issue is different. But arguably, when you know that the president's on the other end of the line and he needs your help, how do you handle the situation broadly?
I think I'm going to do what my conscience tells me to. I don't think I know I will. And I think let's be clear. In most instances, I vote with the caucus most of the time. Like, I'm not going to be some problem child kind of a guy, but there are instances where you can't make peace sometimes with things that happen. And if that's the situation, I'll weather the storm. Like I didn't agree with his position on glyphosate. I don't agree with the deployment of ground troops in Iran right now. I do agree with a surgical approach to dealing with Iran, and his strategy has actually been nothing short of brilliant. But deploying ground troops is an instance where you'd really have to make your case to me after everything we've been through in Iraq and Afghanistan. America does not need another prolonged, never-ending war, Jeff.
We have one more segment in this Iowa Talking Points conversation with Jim Carlin. He is a Republican running for U.S. Senate. Carlin4USSenate.com. Short break now. We're back on the other side on Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. Iowa has a wonderful heritage, and each day I'll share these stories of historic people and events with you. I'm Jeff Stein. Join me for the Iowa Almanac program and learn more about this great place we call home. Now 7 days a week. Listen on radio stations across the state, via podcast, or at iowaalmanac.com.
One opportunity. Change your career. Mud Advertising is hiring product specialists. $20 an hour, paid weekly. That's 52 weeks a year, plus record-breaking profit sharing. Let me repeat, $20 an hour plus record-breaking profit sharing. But we're just getting started. The best in the business: 401k, company match, gold standard health plans, on-site fitness center, generous paid time off, and so much more. Apply today and don't look back.
You're watching Iowa Talking Points, the candidates. Here again is Jeff Stein.
And this Iowa Talking Points, the candidates conversation continues. Final segment now with Jim Carlin, Republican for U.S. Senate. Carlin4USSenate.com is the website. So you're running for office.
Right.
How many terms will you serve, and should there be a limitation on that?
I think 2 terms is plenty, Jeff. And I think once you get past 12 years of being in that place, and you pointed this out earlier, I think you run the risk of becoming more of a politicized bureaucrat who does what he's told than an advocate for the people. And we're basically dealing with a machine that's been around a long, long time. And you have to change the parts of the machine. I think you have to ban super PACs because it's just this unaccountable way of funneling in hundreds of millions of dollars into the election process where we don't really have any semblance of election integrity. And President Trump talked about banning congressional stock trading. I think if you want to serve in the House or Senate, you should sign a pledge and actually legally commit to never serving in the lobby. And if you're a sitting senator or a congressman, you shouldn't have family in the lobby either. We have to deal with the root cause of incentivized corruption in the job and take it away. You have to take it off the field so the people get a fair shake.
You obviously know the counter to that on the term limits issue, which is, if Jim Carlin says he's going to leave after 2 terms, then some other state has somebody who's in there for a longer period of time, we lose our influence and our seniority.
Right.
Are you talking about your own stance, but then working to get some sort of term limit bill passed?
Sure. I would work towards getting a term limit bill passed. And I think the best way to define things is realities that are created by the structure as it is today. And I have 39 trillion reasons to doubt that the system is working well for the people of this country. And I have a lot of inflation that's being put on the shoulders of the American people that has forced 1 in 8 Iowa retirees to go back to work. So when I look collectively at those things, yeah, we need to change the game, Jeff.
Well, that also reminds us about Social Security, that those who are elected in this cycle will absolutely be in office at the time the fund is set to be insolvent. I think it's 2031 now is what we're looking at. So others have kicked the can down the road for years because they wouldn't be there. You'll be there. So on this and similar issues that people are saying, oh, that's the electrified third rail, can't touch that. How do you handle that?
Well, for people that say you can't have any component of private investment in Social Security, my response to them is, well, the federal pension system, which makes use of fixed index funds, seems to work well for them, Jeff. And if people were given the option of putting money into a fixed index fund, right now on average, they'd have 3 times the monthly payment that they're currently receiving. There's not many people who can get by on $2,500 a month right now. And if you're only paying 1.5% interest on the money people are putting in, while inflation is 3 to 5% annually some years, you're not helping those people. You're robbing them. You're robbing them because they could have realized a much better return on the money they put into the system. And they should have that choice the same way federal retirees do. But you make it a matter of choice. You don't mandate it, but you give them that option. I think that is a path back towards solvency. And the other thing is you have to do a deep dive on where the money's going and how it's being spent.
Now, you alluded a moment ago to campaign financing. And again, the money. We've been talking about that.
Right.
There's going to be, I think, $10 billion spent on advertising in this cycle alone. That's by far a record. How do you get your arms around that to do something that is meaningful for the people so that it's not just electing somebody's donors as opposed to an individual?
Well, that is what it is. It's electing donors. And I think you need to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment, because corporations are not people. And when corporations are treated like they're people and they have billions at their disposal, our collective voice gets lost in this massive monolith of advertising you're talking about that the average working person can't compete with, because their message isn't getting out. They don't have access to those kind of resources. And unfortunately for us, the corporations do. And it's been used to our detriment and not to our benefit.
What do you hear from people when you stop at places in Iowa, whether it's a diner or a sporting club or some of the other places I know that you've stopped to talk to people?
Sure. Well, their main concern is the obvious one. They're feeling the squeeze. They're feeling an economic squeeze that, when young families want to buy a house, or they talk about their health insurance costs, or they talk about their student loan costs, the cost of everything. And, the farmers are saying, this is the worst year they've had in a long, since the 80s. I was glad to hear President Trump was doing some things just today to address that. But the farmers are really facing some daunting challenges. There's going to be 28,000 family farms disappears every year in this country. That game needs a reframe as well, and they are talking about it.
We only have a couple of minutes. You're asking Iowans to vote for you, so I'll let you make your case directly to them, sir. Okay.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Jeff. I think the question that every candidate should have to answer is, what am I going to do for you? What am I going to work on for you? I think one of the best things I can do for the people of Iowa is give them some economic and political power back. When you have some economic and political power, you have a voice in this process. I think we need to have some semblance of sound money. The dollars you work for need to keep their value. I think we either need to balance the budget or cap the money supply. I think we need to look at auditing the Federal Reserve's, the impact of the Federal Reserve's monetary policies on the value of those dollars. I actually think we also need to take a look at a return to gold and silver-backed currency, because when we departed from it, we saw a lot of inflation. We need to secure our borders. We need to finish the wall, and we need to pass the SAVE Act. And we have to put people over the machine. And what I mean by that is there is a machine, folks. And for you to get your voice back, there has to be term limits. There has to be an overturning of super PACs so they can't dominate our lives and rob our pockets and rob the economic futures of our children. Those are the kinds of things that I'll be working on. Your economic security and your voice in the political realm, so you can get your voice back in this process and be more economically secure in the long term.
The primary election is on June the 2nd. He is Jim Carlin of Sioux City, Republican running for U.S. Senate. Carlin for USSenate.com. Mr. Carlin, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you for being along on this edition of Iowa Talking Points, The Candidates.
This has been Iowa Talking Points, The Candidates, produced by Studio 5 at Mud Advertising, Totally Iowa Media, and News Talk 1540 KXCL. For more information on this series, go to iowatalkingpoints.com.